Today we're doing one again from work in my car. And what we're doing is we're going with Psalms 44. It's an interesting psalm. I've said that with a lot of psalms. But this one is different because it doesn't sound like it came from David. It doesn't sound like it was written from David. The style is different. So we have someone here who's given us more of a prose understanding as opposed to poetic license. You know, he's using very clear and crisp words, and it still makes it poetry. But he tends to be telling or reminding of activities as opposed to taking emotions and spreading them out. The joy, the angst, the integrity, the righteousness, the unrighteousness. He begins with, we hear with our ears, O God. And the interesting thing is, O God here, O Elohim instead of Jehovah. Doesn't mean it's not Jewish, doesn't mean it's not godly. It's just we are looking at it. When they reference Elohim, remember, most of the time you're referring to the creator God, which is not a problem. A lot of times when they talk about Jehovah, they're talking about the covenant God. When they talk about Adonai, they're talking about, you know, the more intimate, friendly, friendship, connected God. These are all the same person, just different places. We've heard from our ears, with our ears, O God, our fathers have told us what work thou didst in the days of old, how you drove out the heathens with thy hands and plantest them, how thou didst afflict the people and cast them out, how they did not go in the land of possession by their own sword, neither by their own arm, neither them but by thy right hand and thine arm and the light of thy countenance, because thou found favor with them. So they didn't get this based upon their own strengths. They got this because of who their God was. Though through thee we will push down our enemies. Through thy name we will tread them under that rise up against us. For I will not trust in my bow, neither shall my sword save me, but thou hast saved us from our enemies. So we get this again, this idea that comes back again and again of a Savior and how they're relying on God. In God we boast all the day long and praise his name. But he talks about in the middle here how he feels like they have been cast off, how they have been left behind by God, and they have been made a scorn and a reproach of their neighbors, how they didn't do anything wrong. They're saying that for the voice of him that approached us and blasphemed by reason of the enemy and the avenger, for all of this has come upon us, yet have we not forgotten thee? Neither have we dealt falsely in thy covenant. So again, things are happening. And they're happening, and they are doing a righteous judgment of looking through their life and saying, is there anything wrong? Is this a cause and effect? Or is God at move doing something else here? But whether God is doing cause and effect, or whether it's just a move of God for whatever reason, it says, if we have forgotten the name of our God, or stretched our hands to strange God, shall not search this out, for he knoweth the secrets of our hearts. The idea is this person is saying, search our hearts. If we have done these things, if we have gone after other gods, why sleepest thou, O Lord? Arise and don't cast us off forever. This reminds me of when God is in the silent times, and you do introspectives, and you do things, and you're looking through your life and you're saying, where are you? I've not done anything wrong. Why are you not moving? But I love what he says at the end when he says, oh, my soul is bound to the dust. Arise for our help and redeem us from our mercies. He's calling out to God, even though I don't know exactly what's going on. I don't see what is happening or causing these things. And yet you are our God. So it's a very strong, like I said, it doesn't have a lot of poetry into it, not a lot of imagery, a lot of feelings in that vein. But there are strong feelings of in the mental. We have looked through, we have not done anything wrong, we have searched our hearts. I'm going to find faith, the psalmist is saying, and arise and wait for you to redeem us with your mercy. When we go back to 37 and 38, which are the next two, again, we're finding that Bezalel and Aholiab, they are constructing all of the pieces of the Ark of the Covenant and of the Ark of the Covenant, the temple, the courtyard, the hangings, all the things that need to be made for, you know, the tables and the dishes and all the things that need to be done, the epoch, the mitra for the head, all the little the colorings, then working with the gold to weave it in. They're not doing this by themselves. God has given them a small group, and I don't know how big it is when I say small, between we find out later that there's 600,000, well, we did find out, and they do another census, that there's over 600,000 men here. So if you take that with women and children, you could be looking at easy over 1 million, you know, 1.5 million maybe, you know, extrapolating. And these are men from 20 and up, so we haven't counted the teens and the boys. And out of that group, you find people who are artistes who come together. Perhaps, and I'm embellishing a little bit, you had a group of men working out in the woods carving and cutting down trees and carving them into the correct lengths and widths to move them later into the area. They didn't do this on site. They worked off site of where they're going to be. And I'm speculating you'd have to have someone to kind of clear the brush and stuff. So we'll kind of throw that one in there. But everyone who's weaving, but maybe they're weaving in different parts of the camp. Some people are weaving the blue, some people are weaving together with the gold and there's someone over here dyeing it and then taking the linen back and forth. You got people melting the gold and smelting the gold. You got people that are cleaning and melting the silver. You've got people working with the brass in a different area, and all of these things are going on. Then you have, as this great amount of material is being made, it's got to cover the ark, it's got to cover the surrounding areas of the ark, and it's got to be there for the clothing for the high priest and the sons of Aaron, and later on for the tribe of Levi. That's a lot of work going on, and we find out later that they did all of this in 9 months. By the first of their ceremonial year, which would have been the first month of Nisan, they will have all of this done and start consecrating and dedicating. We find that out when we get, I think, to Exodus 40. But before then, in these 2 verses, we're seeing that they've got these groups working, and they're working together. I mean, what else do they have to do? I mean, they're out in the desert. You know, you probably have security and your sentries running around. You probably have people taking care of kids and taking care of animals. You know, you've got your day-to-day life. You've got to be cooking and feeding and taking care of the sick. I mean, there's a lot of things going on. In the middle of that are all these artistes creating and building in different spots, being led by Bezalel and Aholiab, and maybe some other men. But here we are, those are the ones that are mentioned. And so they're overseeing everything. So you get an idea of the scope of this massive thing. We find out in a minute that when they call for all of this, they're just overrun. They just have so much material. They've got so much gold and brass and silver that they're telling them to stop bringing this stuff. We've got enough. We can do, we know what we need, and we've got what we need. And they've got all these artistries working. So Bezalel made the ark of shittim wood, and again, that's the acacia wood. It's a very beautiful wood, by the way, and a strong wood too. So he's got this acacia, and they're carving it, and again, the tree is very tall. You can get all the lumber you want, probably more lumber than they need. And again, like I said, these people were not just stomping mud like in a movie. They were out doing all these things. They were working in stone, working in the wooded areas, working inside the house, working with dyes, working with clothing, working with materials, creating, and even cooking and cleaning, and all these things that they were now doing for themselves. So we see through 37, and 37 and 38 go pretty fast, because basically God is reiterating here, and read it, don't just pass over it. Check his math, you know, go for the fun of it. Check his math to make sure, okay, he made this. 2 cubits and a half was the length, and 1.5 cubits was the breadth. Okay, check mark. And he overlaid it with gold. And again, thinking, you're going to have to take all this gold and heat it up in a cauldron and carefully lay it across the top. Carefully lay it. You don't want bumps. And you have to have people that take care of layering. That's the word I'm looking for. Layering all of this gold carefully onto this wood. And before you can put all this together. And he's casting the rings of gold and making the staves. and he's building everything he needs. He talks about the mercy seats, 2.5 cubits by 1.5 cubit. Once again, check mark. Good job. And he makes these cherubs, which is interesting because he makes them of one piece. You can imagine they made a gigantic outline of what they wanted, and with the depth, and you can imagine it in your head how they created this to create what they want, and then fill it up with gold, and then start chiseling away what you don't need and forming it into what you need out of one piece of gold. Amazing. It's just amazing what they're doing here. And the wings would spread out. This is what we were talking about earlier. And they would touch one another, and the heads were looking down out of one piece. And he made the table of shittim wood and the length and width, and he gives all of that. He talks about the borders and the staves. Talks about the candlesticks and the 6 branches. Once again, check mark. And then he's going with all the knobs, and he made sure 6 branches with knobs and all of this. He talks about the snifters and of pure gold. Seems like everything that touches God has to be pure gold. Everything with him is pure gold. And he made it all out of the acacia wood, and he overlaid it with gold. And they also made the spices and the anointing oils. Now, you imagine that you had a perfumery going on also in some other part of the camp where people are working with these perfumes and things, and working with the incenses and making it exactly as God has specified. And again, this was something you couldn't put on the market. And God wanted this for himself. And do not make a copy of this and start putting it on eBay or something. He will not like it. We go into 38, where we're talking about building the altar, which again, he's building the altar that's going to be outside. He builds the flesh hooks and the pots that are going to be with the pots. He makes the grating, and he makes this this of brass. So once again, working with brass. They built these off-site. So you would have these things being built, like I'm saying, in different parts of the camp. And later on, you're going to find when we get to 39 or 40, they bring it all together, and then they assemble. So right now, everything's in pieces, just being built, and Aholivah and Bezalel are just going all Bezalel are going all over the place, you know, overseeing everything, making sure everything is just right. And they talk about the brass working. They talk about that there was making the laver for it, and there was a looking glass that the women assembled at the door of the tabernacle. So they had a looking glass there too. But they made the laver. See, they're going to make this laver, and it was made out of glass, but it wasn't for looking in. It was for, you know, for the sacrifices and for the meat sacrifices and for cooking. And they made the pillars, working on the south side, the north side, the east, and the west. I always faced east. And so here we would have him facing east. So they're going to have the north and south. Once again, check marks on the length and the width and the height. Talks about the pillars and the sockets. And this is of the hanging that's going to be on the sides. And we go through that and find out about the sockets and the pillars, and they did all of that, and all the pins for the tabernacle that they could pin. Again, you pinned the, remember, we're pinning the wood together. We're not nailing it together. They'd create these latches that they would put board to board, and they would hook on one another and unhook. So you'd slip these things together, and they're tightly fit, and then you unslip them to take them apart. It was just made to be mobile until they made their temple out of stone. And Bezalel, the son of Ur, was son of Hur. He was of the tribe of Judah, had made all that the Lord commanded. And with him was Aholivah of the tribe of Dan, an engraver of cunning work. All the gold had been occupied for the work and for the holy place, even the gold of the offering. And they go through how much it is, and it's a massive amount. Of course, I don't work at how much is a talent and how much is this. If you want to do that, go ahead. I'm just going to go with that's a lot. When you say 29 talents of gold, 730 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary. So you get an idea of how much it was, the talents, and how much was the... And we talk about the silver was numbered 1,015. So that's 1,075 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary. Once again, we're looking at an implication here that the economy would be guided by the sanctuary, and where God would decide the value of money. Here we have our money is either on the gold standard, or now we're on a fiat currency, to where it can be worth or worth less as much as we decide. There, God was establishing a balanced currency Later on, we'll find out that he'll set up a Jubilee year to where if you have any outstanding debts, they're forgiven in 50 years. That's something else we'll discuss when we get to the year of Jubilee. He wouldn't let people just take advantage of that, run up a big debt in year 49 and then write it off. They would actually kind of decide how much money you would need based upon when you were going to get the Jubilee and what you could pay back. So they put a cap on how much you could borrow. It's pretty smart. But God was running by the shekel of the sanctuary. They describe that. And they go through this and they talk about the sockets and the sockets of the courts and the pins of the tabernacle. So here we are. We're finishing 37 and 38. Tomorrow was 39 where they finish it all up. And then 40, they bring it all together. Well, here in 39, they start bringing it all together. And then we consecrate it. And that's all for Exodus. But don't zoom through this stuff. Stop and look. There are reasons why God does not reiterate. He doesn't do run-on sentences. He doesn't just speak to be heard, hears himself speak. There's a reason why he states, he directs, and then he accomplishes. And that's why we're seeing this again and again. He's very clear in what he directs. He's very clear in what he states. He's very clear in what he accomplishes. And there are things. We are called his workmanship, created for good works in Christ. He is very clear about what he wants us to do. Our problem is we monkey around with it and want to add links or take off links or, add our own little designs. We need to stick with his plan. Thank you.